All these suppliers have cottoned on to the expectations of chefs and restaurants in Newcastle. So early on, it influenced you in the fact that you just got what you got, whereas now you can get everything. So you're not really hamstrung by being in a regional town. The world's your oyster, and the stuff you can get is as good as any other capital city in Australia.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. There have been many restaurants closed during the last 2 years. The impact of the pandemic has affected many people and establishments in different ways. It's caused financial hardship, but also it's allowed people to think differently, see the world in a new light, and steer their careers and lives in a different direction. Chris Thornton is the former chef and owner of Restaurant Mason in Newcastle. Chris, how you going?
Yeah, not so bad. Like yourself?
I'm good. After a decade of incredible influence in Newcastle, you've closed the doors on Restaurant Mason. Tell us about that decision.
Look, it was sort of like a bit of a crossroads. Unlike a lot of restaurants, we actually had we were very successful during COVID, and a lot of that came down to like the support we had from our customers, our community, and all the commitment of our staff. So we've had quite a good few years. And then off the back of that, sort of, when we weren't in lockdowns, it was like Newcastle had never eaten at a restaurant before. So we were very lucky to be very, very busy. And yeah, it sort of put us in like prior to COVID, we'd bought into a second business and that had put us in a very bad financial position. And we actually almost lost the restaurant prior to COVID. And then, yeah, with our success of our takeaway and stuff like that, we were able to sort of save the restaurant and get into a position where, sort of we didn't owe anyone any money and all of our liabilities were covered and stuff like that. So, yeah, that was sort of one of the decisions. I mean, restaurants very rarely get to shut of their own choice. They're usually forced to close and through, no fault, deliberate fault of anyone's, usually leave a trail of debt and destruction. So that was one of them. Our long-term front of house manager, Antonio, had decided that he, had sort of got a bit too old for hospitality and needed a break off his feet. The kids weren't getting any younger. It was our lease was up and it was time for us to sign a new long-term lease if we wanted to. And I think just the general feeling, I think, amongst the staff, because I've had a lot of my guys for long periods, for 10, 8, 5, 6 years, that kind of stuff. And, and we were extremely lucky in that part. And you could just see the general feeling was that I think everyone needed just a refresher and something a bit different. And yeah, I don't know. We just sort of we ummed and ahed about it for a while, and then we just decided that let's do this. Let's have a break. I sat down one morning and that was pretty much it. We had a chat with the staff and then put the post up and that was it. So yeah.
After the decision was made to close the restaurant, was it harder than you anticipated to go through the process and as you wound down and closed the doors?
I don't think hard's the right word. It was a long process. Like there was obviously been an established business for so long. There was a lot of things to do, but I said before, the restaurant fought me to the end. We had to replace a freezer 2 weeks out, and the grease trap, decided to have a bit of a conniption, and had a few staff down with injuries and babies and things like that. But I think overall, the word I can most describe was just enjoyable. It was like a weight had been lifted off everyone's shoulders, like not just mine and Amy's, but the staff as well. And they were like, hey, well, this place has been our home for so long and this is the last time we're going to get to enjoy it. And that was just the general feeling around Newcastle as a whole. And it was, I think mainly because no one was worried about getting paid. Suppliers weren't worried about what's happening with their accounts and stuff like that. So my wife wasn't getting hassled here at home. It was just positive vibes. Like, people were just like, yeah, we want to get into Mason one more time. And I had old staff coming in just to do another shift. And, it was just the most incredible experience. And, I think my last speech on the night, because on the last night we did like a final supper, have VIP guests, or pretty much family, and our direct family and some friends and stuff like that. And, we didn't realise how important the restaurant had become to a lot of people. They had everything there from birthdays. We'd have people who'd come there on first dates and then got engaged, and then we catered their weddings, and they came for anniversaries, and it was just the most incredible, incredibly humbling and positive experience. And that last week and that last night, I can't. It was very emotional, but very, very positive at the same time.
Your influence on the Newcastle dining scene over the last decade has been extraordinary. How have you seen the dining landscape evolve during that time in Newcastle?
I've been even before the restaurant. I did my entire apprenticeship in Newcastle, and when I was coming through, there was really only us at Restaurant 2 with Pete Bryant, and then you had Bacchus as well. And then even when I opened the restaurant, it was the same thing. There was only sort of one or two. And then when Subo opened as well, there was three of us. And it was sort of like there was us at the top, and then, you sort of had your cafes and your pubs and things like that. And then you've just watched over the last, decade, the filling in of everything in between. And I think that's come from an expansion of the expectations and the palette of the Newcastle community, where, the quality of food and coffee being served at cafes has skyrocketed. You've got individual cuisines, like, you've got your Japanese, you've got your Ethiopian, you've got your Mexican, all those kind of stuff, who are serving incredible quality. Your pubs are pushing towards that more gastro pub style food, which is, not just your standard snitty and $3 rump steak kind of stuff. So I just, there was always an extremely good couple of restaurants with really, you think of like Tim Montgomery is an incredible chef, Bo Vincent at Subo and Susie and that, and now it's, Shayna Flotilla and Mike at Humbug. Like, there was always some really good chefs and really good restaurants, but, you just look at everything else now, and just the entire food scene has just stepped up completely. So, you even look at like Signal Box, which is, it's a heaving beast, but the quality of food that like George and that are putting out there is just, it's just amazing.
I want to explore sort of what you did at Restaurant Mason over that decade, but take us back to when you were young. What sort of role did food play in your family?
Look, Mum was always a good cook. I haven't got your sort of, my nonna used to make all this kind of stuff, because Mum and Dad emigrated here from England, so it was only ever the four of us. Like, my brother and I were born over here, but there was only ever the four of us, so we didn't have these huge family gatherings. But, Mum was always an excellent cook. She always tried different things. I always remember her fish and her white fish and parsley sauce, and, she used to do lamb racks, and she'd try different things like, glaze with a bit of honey and cedar mustard, and she always tried like baking the jam tart. So we always enjoyed really nice food at home. And then sort of when I went into high school and we were picking, our work experience and our modules and stuff like that, like hospitality was one of the first things, just because I loved eating food. And I think from that first moment of doing work experience, I was just like, I'm hooked. I love cooking, and I sort of did that through high school, and then sort of came time to go to university, and I was sort of looking at like radiation therapy and stuff like that, and I just thought, I can't see myself ever sitting in front of books for the next 5 years, and I just want to cook. I just loved it. I know it sounds a bit weird, but I just love being a pirate in the kitchen. It was just cooking food, and just carrying on, and exploring your artistic side, and the swearing and the carrying on and the camaraderie and all this kind of stuff. I said that's where I want to be. my parents are super supportive of it, and the only thing that my dad said to me, he goes, "I really don't care what you do, just be the best at it." And yeah, I just set out on this. I'm going to try and be the best. That view of being the best changed, down the track. But I was like, I'm going to find the best restaurant in Newcastle, and I'm going to try this. And then, I was lucky enough to win the Brett Graham scholarship. So it was kind of one of the best restaurants in the world. And then, when I came back and did a few other jobs, and I was like, I'm going to open the best restaurant in Newcastle, and that's what I'm going to do. And, it just sort of went on from there.
Take us back to those early years. Do you have any stories of what it was like in the commercial kitchens in Newcastle when you were getting started, and sort of what influence they had on you?
Definitely Pete Bryant at Restaurant 2. I did 3 of the 4 years of my apprenticeship with Peter. And he was like, it was a family-run business. It was Pete and Therese. She did the front of house. She did Pete did the kitchen, and it was sort of there. I was first introduced to the community aspect of a restaurant, and how Pete involved himself with his customers, and how the customers reacted and treated Pete and Therese. And yeah, that was really cool. Just the respect that they had for him, and vice versa, and how he treated his customers. And he was also a very kind chef, so he treated us really well in the kitchen as well. So yeah, I mean, probably the biggest thing for that is that a lot of the customers that he introduced to me at that restaurant then followed me to Restaurant 2. And there's a lady who's now unfortunately no longer with us, Mrs. Mellink, and she was a regular customer of Restaurant 2 and actually had a heart attack on the stairs of Restaurant 2. And she survived, and that was cool. And then when we opened Restaurant 2, she was one of the first customers to come there. And, I fed Mrs. Mellink the entire time. And when we shut, we reached out to her to say, we would like you to be there on our final night. And then, we got an email back, and unfortunately she'd passed away a week prior. So, yeah, that's probably the biggest thing from early on in Newcastle. It's the community, like the people that I've been privileged enough to meet and to cook for, and to work with and to train and all that kind of stuff like that. I don't think, I'm not saying it doesn't happen in larger cities, but I don't think you would get that as much in larger cities. I've had customers that have eaten with me every Friday lunch for the last 10 years, and yeah, that was definitely the biggest thing, I reckon. So,
you mentioned winning the Brett Graham Award and heading over to the UK. How different was working in the UK compared to what you'd experienced in Australia? Oh,
massively. I thought the sun shined out my arse, and it was the greatest thing going in cooking at the time. And then I got to London, and Brett quickly informed me that was definitely not the case, and it's exactly what I needed. I mean, I'll say this until I'm blue in the face that without the Ledbury, I would not be not just the chef, but the person I am today. Brett taught me how to cook properly. And then, not just Brett, but all the guys there taught me how to operate at such a high stress level for such a long period of time without compromise that, it just changed the way it just changed the way I operate for the rest of my life in not just cooking, but just in everything. It was proper kitchen then. So yeah. That was it.
Take us into the kitchen over there at the Ledbury. Do you have any stories of that sort of influence and what it was like being on the line cooking there?
It was hard. I'd never experienced such a level of perfection on what was expected at all times, and it wasn't just what you put on the plate. It was I don't think I've got any really individual stories. I mean, I witnessed Brett stack up 12 plates of food because he wasn't happy with one piece of mackerel. He was prepared to sacrifice the entire table because one piece of mackerel wasn't perfect. and your fridges had to be perfect, and your chives had to be perfect, and everything had to be perfect, and anything less was unacceptable. So yeah, the biggest thing I say is that there was 13 blokes in there at all time, striving for perfection, working their asses off, and there's nothing else like it. And it's so inspiring and so terrifying all at the same time.
When you came back to Newcastle to open your own restaurant, was it hard sort of translating the experiences that you'd had over in the UK for the Newcastle market and find your voice?
Not really. I mean, Brett's food it's extremely translatable, and it's the type of food that I've always based my cooking off. Is that it's not anything weird or brain melting. It is extremely good produce, cooked extremely well, and served at extremely high level. So it was Brett's an Castrian, so and the guys that he trained with in Sydney, like you look at their food of what Justin North and Matt Kemp and all that were doing at their restaurants. It's just very high quality food. It's nothing weird. It is cooked perfectly and just tastes delicious. So coming back to Newcastle, that's what I need to do. I just need to find the best stuff I can find, and just cook it the best way possible and just serve to these people, and hopefully they appreciate it. And they did. So I was very lucky.
Tell us about the first couple of years with Restaurant Mason and developing the team and the offering. Was it quite different to what it ended up being 10 years later?
The start was definitely hard. I mean, I was pretty young, and in hindsight, I was probably too young to open a restaurant. You're dealing with all these financial things that you never had to before, staffing and just general expectations. Like I was very lucky in the fact that a couple of staff that came with me I'd worked with before and I trusted really well, and that was Danny and Antonio, and I had them for the entire 10 years. So that took a massive portion of that restaurant, like brain space, away that I didn't ever need to worry about. So I was very lucky in that. But as far as the offering goes, I'd probably say it finished closer to what it started with than what it was in the middle, if that makes sense. I was sort of thinking about this interview. The evolution of our Good Food God hats probably, those points dictated what we did with our food, funnily enough. So at the start, we were just doing what we could do with the team we had and what I felt comfortable with. And we were lucky enough to be awarded a hat in our first year. And then, for a couple of years we were like that, but I'd sort of gone on this path of I need to get better, I need to put more on the plate, I need to get better, I need to put more on the plate. And it sort of got to the point where, I don't know, I remember one day looking at the food and what we were doing and going, this is too much. I feel like I've maybe lost my way a bit. And then we lost the hat. And that was actually kind of similar to shutting the restaurant, a bit of a weight off the shoulders. We lost it more for our decor than we did anything else, but it was sort of like, okay, cool. We haven't got a hat anymore, so there isn't this expectation. So I'm just going to cook what I want to cook from now on, not what I think other people want to eat. So we just simplified, not so much simplified the food and what we did, made it easier. We focused more on the less things on the plate, but a higher level of technique, similar to what Brett was doing with the Ledbury. And I actually feel that we were cooking our best food towards the end of the restaurant because of that.
Do you have any examples that sort of exemplify this sort of clarity and understanding of your own cooking and that you can tell us about?
Yeah, so I mean, there's two specific pork dishes. So We had this one, and it was like an Asiata suckling pig. So all these different cuts with, 2 different kinds of purees, 2 different kind of vegetable garnishes, and a sauce. And then it had like a crumble and had some herbs on it. Like, it was just, there were so many touches on this plate, and it was a nice dish, but I was almost like a bit confused. And then you fast forward a little bit, and we were just serving this really beautifully charcoal grilled, like immaculate cuisson pork cutlet, with some cabbage that we just, like, from one of our local growers, that we just grilled and then glazed in honey and sesame, and then a really traditional style, like a roux gravy with like heaps of Pernod and stuff through it, and like, it was just so much more delicious than what the previous pork dish had been. But, although we'd taken bits off, we just focused on, okay, I've got this amazing butcher in Brankston, Hungerford Meats now, so he can get me the best local pork. I'm getting these incredible sugarloaf cabbages, and I could have never got these cabbages, 4 or 5 years ago. So let's use those, and we'll respect them incredibly. And then being able to have the staff to take this old school technique of a roux-based sauce and translate it into a relatively modern dish with modern chefs who had never seen anything like it before. It was that kind of clarity then just flowed down into the rest of the dishes we did. And it was kind of interesting. The more I looked at my food towards the end, the more I looked at it as what I'd fallen in love with at the Ledbury when I'd worked there. Just, yeah. Yeah.
You mentioned about when you were young, always wanting to be the best, but your views on being the best and success had changed as you got older. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. Once again, very similar with like the chef's hats. That mid sort of 2015, 16, 17. Like, I was really pushing it. Like, I was lucky enough to be named Young Restaurateur of the Year. With Bianca for the Electrolux, Appetite for Excellence, and then I was invited to do Pork Stars and all this kind of stuff like that. And I suppose it almost came down to the birth of our first child, and then priorities started to change. And then, it's kind of hard. Like, I think once you become comfortable with yourself, and this is taking nothing away from people who succeed and who win. Like, I look at Troy Rhodes Brown, and that guy is one of the most incredible chefs, businessmen, and just blokes that I've ever met. Like, I'm lucky to call him a great mate, and looking at the trajectory that his career has taken and what he does with it is incredible. But that's not for me. Like, I can't aspire to something like that. I don't know if I maybe don't have the commitment or the aspiration for it, but I did early on, and then I look at sort of where I am now, and success for me is happiness. It's spending time with my family. It's taking my kids to sport. It's seeing the smile on the face of an apprentice who has been given praise because he's cooked the most perfect scallop, and he's being able to give one of my chefs the weekend off and him being stoked with that, or, talking to the suppliers and not saying, yeah, no worries, mate, I'll try and get that bill paid, or, just that last month in general, the restaurant. Like, for me, that was being the best. It went from being individual success to how can I just be the best at who I am. And that for me was much more fulfilling.
A decade is an incredible amount of time for a restaurant. Do you have any fond memories or key moments that you can share about the last decade?
There's a lot. There's a lot of fond memories. I mean, I had a girl working for me for quite a few years, and she was getting married to a Fijian guy. And there was a few issues in the family on her side, and they were, and I remember her overhearing her saying, I think we're just going to get married at the marriage council office, whatever it is, first set of marriages, and just saying to her, like, you're not doing that. You're going to get married here, and we're going to have a proper wedding, and we're going to have food, and everyone's going to enjoy themselves. Being able to do that for her was really memorable. Like I said, our first hat, we did a massive renovation and expanded the restaurant. That was super memorable. I don't know. It's really hard to pinpoint a lot of individual memories. Like, I look at it as that restaurant gave us everything over the last 10 years. It provided us with what we have. It introduced us to so many incredible people. I was able to sponsor my local sporting club. I was able to help charities. I've met, like, some of the guys I call my closest friends now, I wouldn't have met if I didn't have the restaurant. Like, I don't look at it as like individual memories. I'll just look at it as just 10 years of the most incredible thing that I've ever done. So,
how does living in Newcastle influence what produce you use and what ends up on the plate?
It used to be is what you can get is what you can get. It was very hard. It was hard back in the day. Guys did go to Sydney, but not as regularly as sort of what would have been good. So you were kind of limited to your basic stuff. But then over the last 10 years, like, you've watched guys like Dylan from Newcastle Greens, Mick from Hunger for Meat Co. Basil at Chain Seafood. Like, all these suppliers have cottoned on to the expectations of chefs and restaurants in Newcastle and have changed with the times. And, you get up in Newcastle now, the best duck and quail you can get in all of Australia. You ask, like, Charlie from Redgate Farm, a lot of his stuff is used all the way up and down the East Coast. Dylan's stuff gets used in Queensland a lot of time in Sydney. So early on it influenced you in the fact that you just got what you got, whereas now you can get everything. So you're not really hamstrung by being in a regional town. The world's your oyster, and the stuff you can get is as good as any other capital city in Australia. So
you've let go of something that's been a big part of your life for the last 10 years. What's the plans moving forward?
So I've got another sort of profession that I've been working in for the last 3 years. But I'm going to have a couple of months off from, I don't know, committed cooking. But there's plenty of friends around here that are going to need a hand over the next few months, and I've got a lot of favours that I think are going to be called in. So I dare say I was did a shift at the Mayfield West kebab shop the other day for my mates down the road, and they were a bit short-staffed because of COVID and things like that. But yeah, I've got a couple of charity events that I'll be doing, one or two private events that I've already got booked in, and then I think come maybe September, October, I'll start doing a few more sort of the in-house private events, which I was doing quite a lot of the last few years. And then, who knows what the future holds.
What do you love about what you do?
Oh, just everything. Like, how can you not love being a chef and cooking? It's one of the most, it is, it's one of the most enjoyable things that I've ever done. Like, being able to get a whole duck in and break it down and then dry aging it and then pan frying and then watching the enjoyment as it's being served and someone eating it and then someone seeing you later and going, that was the most incredible duck. And then, having been able to do that every day in a kitchen with your mates, having a good time, and just being pirates and having fun. It's probably, and that's probably the biggest thing I'm missing since shutting the restaurant is it's just cooking. I do it here every night, and I'm going to cook for the family and stuff like that. But nothing will ever compare to being in a room with 6 other blokes, burning and cutting yourself and yelling profanities across the kitchen and throwing peas at the pastry chef and stuff like that. So Yeah.
Well, Chris, congratulations on what you built there in Newcastle, and it's been an absolute honour to have you on Deep in the Weeds today to hear a bit of your story. Good luck with what you have in the future, and keep in touch, and we'll catch up again soon.
No worries, Huck. Thank you very much, mate. And thanks for supporting Newcastle. So, cheers.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.